The boarding gate at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport buzzes with the usual pre-flight energy. Business travelers check their phones, families wrangle luggage, and the occasional first-class passenger glides past with an air of understated privilege. Among them walks 23-year-old Dr. Zara Washington, her dark skin glowing under the terminal's fluorescent lights, dressed in a navy blazer that speaks of professionalism without pretension. She clutches a leather messenger bag adorned with NASA patches and scientific conference stickers, her laptop case bearing the coveted NASA Research Fellowship winner logo. Her boarding pass reads 1MA, first class, window seat. The ticket was a gift from her mother, Dr. Diana Washington, CEO of Washington Aerospace Technologies, who insisted her daughter travel in comfort before the biggest moment of her young career. As Zara approaches the aircraft, her phone buzzes with a reminder. NASA Young Innovator Award Ceremony, 7:00 p.m. PST. She's about to become the youngest recipient in the award's 50-year history, recognized for her revolutionary fuel efficiency technology that could transform commercial aviation. The weight of the moment settles on her shoulders as she steps into the jet bridge. But when Zara enters the first-class cabin, her heart sinks. A 62-year-old white man in an expensive navy suit has claimed her window seat. Robert Sterling sits with the casual arrogance of someone accustomed to taking what he wants, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, his Rolex catching the cabin light as he waves his hand dismissively. "Excuse me," he declares without looking up from his phone. "You can sit somewhere else. I like this seat better, and I have priority here." The words hit the cabin like a thunderclap. Other passengers turn to stare, some already reaching for their phones to capture what's unfolding. Zara checks her boarding pass again, confusion clouding her features. "I'm sorry, sir, but this is seat 1A. It's assigned to me on my boarding pass." Robert finally looks up, his blue eyes scanning Zara with barely concealed disdain. "Listen, sweetheart, I've been flying first class since before you were born. I know how this works. I want this seat, and frankly, someone your age probably doesn't appreciate the finer things anyway." The casual cruelty in his voice makes nearby passengers shift uncomfortably. Flight attendant Patricia Morrison, a 45-year-old woman with tired eyes and a practiced smile, approaches with clipboard in hand. "Is there a problem here?" she asks, but her gaze immediately fixes on Zara as if she's the source of trouble. "No problem at all," Robert says smoothly. "Just explaining to the young lady that I'll be taking this seat. I'm sure she can find somewhere else more suitable." What Robert Sterling doesn't know, what none of them know, is that the young lady he's dismissing so casually has just revolutionized aerospace technology. Her fuel efficiency innovations are classified at the highest levels, her work destined to reshape how America travels through the skies. But right now, all they see is a young black woman who doesn't belong in their world of privilege and power. They have no idea that her mother's company manufactured the very engines powering this aircraft, or that a simple phone call could ground every plane in this fleet. The real story is just beginning. Zara Washington embodies the quiet confidence of someone who has earned every accolade through merit alone. At 23, she carries herself with the poise of someone twice her age, her doctorate from MIT evident in the way she speaks, measured, precise, thoughtful. Her blazer is off the rack but well tailored, her shoes practical yet professional. She represents the new generation of American excellence, brilliant, determined, and utterly unpretentious. The messenger bag slung across her shoulder tells the story of her achievements. Patches from the National Science Foundation, stickers from aerospace conferences, and the distinctive NASA logo that marks her as part of America's space exploration elite. Her laptop case bears evidence of a mind that thinks in revolutionary terms, covered with badges from innovation summits and research symposiums where she's been not just a participant, but a featured speaker. Her family's story reads like the American dream realized. Dr. Diana Washington built Washington Aerospace Technologies from a small engineering firm into one of the nation's premier defense contractors, specializing in cutting-edge propulsion systems. Zara grew up in a household where dinner conversations centered on thrust ratios and orbital mechanics, where excellence wasn't just expected, it was the baseline. But none of that matters to Robert Sterling, who sees only what his prejudices allow him to perceive. Young people today, he continues, settling deeper into Zara's assigned seat, think everything should be handed to them. I've earned my place in first class through 40 years of hard work and substantial financial contribution to this airline. Patricia Morrison nods sympathetically, her body language clearly aligning with Robert's perspective. Mr. Sterling is one of our most valued elite diamond members, she tells Zara, as if this explanation should suffice. Perhaps there was some confusion with your booking? The subtle racism embedded in her question makes Zara's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Patricia doesn't ask Robert to verify his seat assignment or show his boarding pass. She doesn't question his right to be in first class. Those challenges are reserved for the young black woman who clearly doesn't fit their mental image of who belongs in premium seating. There's no confusion, Zara replies evenly, maintaining her professional composure despite the growing knot of frustration in her stomach. I have seat 1A clearly printed on my boarding pass, purchased and assigned by my family. Robert snorts derisively. Your family, huh? Let me guess. Mommy and Daddy saved up their whole year's salary to buy their precious daughter one fancy plane ticket so she could play pretend with the grown-ups. The assumption stings not because it's insulting, but because it reveals the depth of his ignorance. If Robert knew that Zara's mother personally knew the airline's CEO, that Washington Aerospace Technologies held a $500 million contract with this very airline, that Zara herself was traveling to receive one of the nation's highest scientific honors, would his tune change? I understand you may have your preferences, Zara says carefully. But this is my assigned seat. I'm traveling to an important conference and need to be well rested upon arrival. Important conference? Robert laughs, a sound devoid of humor. What kind of important conference does someone your age attend? Some social media influencer gathering? A participation trophy ceremony? Patricia chuckles at Robert's joke, further emboldening his performance. Other first-class passengers begin to take notice, some filming discreetly with their phones, others simply gawking at the unfolding drama. Actually, Zara says with quiet dignity, I'm traveling to receive the NASA Young Innovator Award for breakthrough research in aerospace fuel efficiency. The cabin falls silent for a moment. Then Robert erupts in condescending laughter. NASA, he bellows. Oh, that's rich. And I suppose next you'll tell me you've invented some magical fuel that runs on wishful thinking? Listen, sweetheart. I've been in business long enough to recognize a scam when I see one. These diversity programs hand out fancy titles like candy these days, but real innovation comes from real professionals. His words carry the weight of generations of gatekeeping, the assumption that excellence must look a certain way, come from certain backgrounds, follow certain paths. In Robert's worldview, a young black woman cannot possibly be the brilliant scientist she claims to be. It simply doesn't compute with his understanding of how merit and achievement are distributed in America. What he doesn't realize is that his very dismissal is being recorded not just by passenger phones, but by Zara's own device. Every word, every gesture, every assumption is being documented with the precision of someone trained in scientific methodology. The stage is set for a collision between entitlement and excellence, between assumption and reality, between the old guard's prejudices and the new generation's undeniable achievements. Robert Sterling's confidence grows with each passing moment, fed by Patricia's obvious support and the other passenger's failure to challenge his behavior. He shifts more comfortably in Zara's seat, spreading his belongings as if staking permanent claim to territory he's decided belongs to him. "The problem with your generation," he continues, his voice carrying the tone of someone accustomed to being heard, "is that you think showing up is the same as earning your place. I've flown with this airline for 2 decades, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on tickets, and built relationships with people who matter. That gives me certain privileges." He pulls out his platinum credit card, waving it like a weapon. "You see this? This represents real success, real contribution to the economy. I can buy and sell whatever little startup or non-profit you think you work for." Zara watches this display with the detached fascination of a scientist observing a specimen. Her training has taught her to document aberrant behavior, to note patterns and draw conclusions based on evidence. What she's witnessing is a masterclass in how power, even imagined power, can corrupt judgment and humanity. "Mr. Sterling," she says calmly, "I respect your loyalty to this airline, but that doesn't give you the right to take someone else's assigned seat. I'd appreciate it if you'd check your boarding pass and move to your correct location." The request, delivered with professional courtesy, seems to enrage Robert further. My correct location is wherever I damn well please. I've earned the right to sit wherever I'm most comfortable, and if that inconveniences some kid playing dress-up scientist, so be it." Patricia Morrison steps forward, her allegiance clear. "Perhaps we could upgrade you to another first-class seat," she suggests to Zara. "Mr. Sterling has been very vocal about his seating preferences, and we do try to accommodate our most frequent flyers." The casual acceptance of Robert's entitled behavior reveals the systematic nature of the problem. This isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern of privilege being honored over policy, of assumptions about who deserves what based on appearance rather than facts. "I don't want another seat," Zara replies firmly. "I want the seat I paid for, that was assigned to me, that my family specifically chose for me. Why should I be the one who has to compromise?" Robert's face flushes red. "Because that's how the real world works, Princess. Some people matter more than others. Some people have earned their place through decades of contribution, and some people," he looks Zara up and down dismissively, "are just diversity hires trying to punch above their weight class." The racial undertone in his comments is unmistakable now. Several passengers shift uncomfortably, but none speak up. The bystander effect is in full force. Everyone assumes someone else will intervene, so no one does. "I earned my place through a doctoral degree from MIT, peer-reviewed research published in the Journal of Aerospace Engineering, and innovations that are currently being implemented by NASA," Zara states matter-of-factly. "What credentials determine your right to take my seat?" Robert waves her accomplishments away like smoke. "Anyone can claim anything these days. MIT probably felt sorry for you, let you in through some quota system. And as for NASA, we all know how those government jobs work. It's all about checking boxes, not actual merit." His dismissal cuts deeper than he knows. Zara's path to NASA was paved with 18-hour days in the lab, with calculations that other graduate students couldn't follow, with innovations that made her professors stop and recalculate their own assumptions about what was possible. She earned her position through brilliance that couldn't be denied, not despite her race and age, but because her mind operates on a level that transcends such arbitrary categories. "You know what I think?" Robert continues, warming to his theme. "I think someone made a mistake with your ticket. I think you're supposed to be back in economy with the other budget travelers, and somehow the computer glitched and put you up here with the people who actually belong in first class." Patricia nods along, clearly buying into Robert's narrative. "Computer errors do happen," she says. "Perhaps we should contact the gate and verify the booking." The suggestion that Zara's presence in first class must be a mistake, that her NASA credentials must be fabricated, that her achievements must be the result of lowered standards rather than exceptional ability, it all compounds into a moment of crystalline clarity for her. She realizes she's not just fighting for a seat. She's fighting against every assumption, every stereotype, every barrier that people like Robert Sterling have constructed to maintain their sense of superiority. This isn't about airline seating charts. This is about who gets to occupy space in America, who gets believed, who gets respected. And Robert Sterling has chosen the wrong young scientist to underestimate. Zara quietly activates her phone's recording function, documenting every word for what she suspects will become a much larger reckoning. Because if Robert thinks this confrontation will end with her meekly accepting a lesser seat, he's about to learn just how wrong entitled assumptions can be. Robert Sterling's performance reaches new heights of cruelty as he senses what he perceives as victory. The longer Zara stands in the aisle, the more convinced he becomes that she'll eventually slink away in defeat, another entitled millennial put in her proper place by someone who understands how the real world operates. "You want to know what I really think?" he says, his voice carrying to every corner of the first-class cabin. "I think this whole NASA story is complete fabrication. Young black women like you are very good at spinning elaborate tales to get sympathy and special treatment, but I've been around long enough to spot a fraud when I see one." The accusation hangs in the air like poison gas. Patricia Morrison's eyebrows raise slightly, as if Robert has voiced suspicions she'd been harboring, but was too polite to express. Other passengers crane their necks, smartphones at the ready, sensing that something dramatic is about to unfold. "These days, anyone can create fake credentials," Robert continues, his voice gaining momentum. "Anyone can Photoshop an ID badge, create a website, print official-looking documents. The technology exists, and frankly, your generation is very sophisticated when it comes to digital deception." Zara's hands tremble slightly as she maintains her composure. Every instinct screams at her to defend herself, to pull out her phone and call NASA directly, to provide evidence that would silence Robert's accusations. But she recognizes that the burden of proof has been shifted entirely onto her shoulders, a burden that Robert himself has never been asked to bear. "Sir," she says with remarkable restraint, "I have my NASA identification, my conference credentials, and detailed documentation of my work. I'm happy to provide any verification you need." Robert waves dismissively. "Documents that can be faked, credentials that can be purchased online, identification that can be forged. I'm telling you, I've seen this exact scam before. Young people create elaborate fictional personas to gain access to opportunities they haven't earned." Patricia Morrison steps closer, her expression shifting from mild annoyance to genuine concern. "Mr. Sterling raises valid points," she says. "We have had issues with fraudulent bookings in the past. Perhaps you could provide additional verification of your identity and payment method." The request, made only of Zara, never of Robert, crystallizes the double standard at play. No one questions Robert's right to occupy any seat he chooses. No one demands additional verification from the white businessman who claims special privileges. Those burdens fall exclusively on the young black woman whose very presence in first class is treated as inherently suspicious. "I'm happy to provide verification," Zara replies evenly, "but I'd like to understand why I'm being asked for additional documentation when other passengers aren't held to the same standard." Robert's laugh is sharp and humorless. "Because other passengers don't show up with elaborate stories about being rocket scientists at age 23. Because other passengers aren't clearly trying to scam their way into seats they can't afford." The accusation of being a scammer stings precisely because it reveals the assumptions underlying Robert's worldview. In his mind, a young black woman in first class must be there through deception, through charity, through some form of trickery. Never through merit, never through achievement, never through the simple fact of purchasing a ticket like any other passenger. "You want to know what I think happened?" Robert continues, now playing to his audience of fellow passengers. "I think someone felt sorry for you Maybe some white guilt liberal who wanted to feel good about themselves, and they gave you their ticket or paid your way. And now you're up here pretending to be something you're not, hoping nobody notices the obvious inconsistencies in your story. Patricia nods thoughtfully, as if Robert's amateur detective work makes perfect sense. That would explain some of the irregularities, she muses. We do occasionally see situations where passengers aren't quite who they appear to be. The casual acceptance of Robert's wild theories, the willingness to believe the most elaborate conspiracy rather than accept that Zara might simply be a brilliant young scientist traveling to receive an award, reveals the depth of systemic bias she's confronting. I notice you haven't shown your boarding pass or identification, Zara observes to Robert. If verification is important, shouldn't everyone be held to the same standard? Robert's face reddens with indignation. Are you questioning my right to be here? I'm a paying customer, a valued member of this airline's loyalty program, a respected businessman who's been flying first class since before you were old enough to pronounce airplane. My credentials are established through decades of professional success and financial contribution. The circular logic is breathtaking. Robert deserves special treatment because he's always received special treatment. His authority is legitimate because it's never been questioned. His place in first class is secure because people like him have always occupied such spaces. But Zara represents something that threatens this comfortable certainty. She embodies the possibility that merit might actually matter more than appearance, that excellence might emerge from unexpected places, that the future might belong to people who don't look like the gatekeepers of the past. As the confrontation escalates, neither Zara nor Robert realizes that someone has already called security. An anonymous tip has reached airport authorities, claiming that a disruptive passenger is creating safety concerns in first class. The caller, whose voice sounds remarkably similar to Robert Sterling's, reports suspicious behavior, possible document fraud, and potential security threats. Within minutes, this war of words will become something much more serious. And Robert Sterling, so confident in his ability to manipulate the situation to his advantage, has no idea that he's about to face consequences far beyond anything he's ever imagined. The situation spirals beyond mere passenger dispute when Airport Security Officer James Johnson boards the aircraft, his presence immediately shifting the dynamic from customer service issue to potential law enforcement matter. Behind him follows Air Marshal Rebecca Torres, her trained eyes scanning the cabin for threats as she processes the anonymous tip that brought her here. We received reports of a disruptive passenger and possible security concerns, Officer Johnson announces, his gaze immediately focusing on Zara as the reported source of trouble. The assumption is automatic, unconscious, and devastating in its implications. Robert Sterling straightens in Zara's stolen seat, his demeanor shifting from entitled passenger to concerned citizen. Thank goodness you're here, officer. I've been trying to handle this situation diplomatically, but I'm genuinely worried about what we might be dealing with. His performance is masterful, honed by decades of manipulating service workers and authority figures. Robert understands instinctively how to position himself as the reasonable party, the responsible adult dealing with an unreasonable situation. His age, his race, his expensive clothing, his confident manner, all of it combines to create an aura of credibility that law enforcement instinctively trusts. This young woman boarded with what appear to be fraudulent documents, Robert continues, his voice heavy with manufactured concern. She's claiming to be some kind of NASA scientist, which is obviously absurd for someone her age. I suspect we might be looking at identity theft, credit card fraud, or worse. The words "or worse" hang in the air with ominous implication. In post-9/11 America, airline security threats are taken seriously, and Robert's suggestion that Zara might represent something more dangerous than a simple scammer immediately escalates the situation. Air Marshal Torres steps forward, her hand resting casually but meaningfully near her weapon. Ma'am, I need you to remain calm and cooperate fully with our investigation. Can you provide identification and documentation of your ticket purchase? The burden of proof has shifted entirely onto Zara's shoulders. She's now presumed guilty of fraud, potential terrorism, or whatever crime Robert's imagination can conjure. Meanwhile, Robert himself has never been asked to verify his right to occupy the seat he's stolen, never been questioned about his own credentials or intentions. Of course, Zara replies, her scientific training helping her maintain composure under pressure. I have my NASA identification, my boarding pass, my conference materials, and my driver's license. I'm Dr. Zara Washington, traveling to San Francisco to receive the NASA Young Innovator Award. Robert scoffs audibly. Doctor, she's 23 years old, and these documents could easily be fabricated. These kids today are incredibly sophisticated with technology. They can create anything that looks official. Officer Johnson examines Zara's credentials with the suspicious scrutiny typically reserved for known criminals. Every document is held up to the light, every detail questioned, every element treated as potentially fraudulent. The NASA badge that represents years of groundbreaking research is dismissed as possibly purchased online. The MIT doctoral degree that required her to master quantum mechanics and aerospace engineering is treated as suspicious for someone so young. Meanwhile, Air Marshal Torres has been conducting her own investigation, speaking quietly into her radio as she coordinates with federal authorities. The anonymous tip mentioned possible terrorist connections, suggested that Zara might be using stolen identity to board aircraft for nefarious purposes, hinted at international spy networks using young minorities as cover for operations against American interests. Ma'am, we're going to need to conduct a more thorough investigation, Torres announces. Please gather your belongings. You'll need to come with us for additional questioning. The words hit the cabin like a thunderbolt. Passengers who had been discreetly filming the confrontation now openly stare as Zara is escorted toward what appears to be arrest. Social media posts begin flying. Terrorist caught on Atlanta flight, and young woman arrested for airline fraud, and hero passenger prevents attack. Robert Sterling watches his handiwork with undisguised satisfaction. He's managed to transform a simple seat dispute into a federal security matter, positioning himself as the vigilant citizen who prevented potential catastrophe. In his mind, he's proven his point about modern society, about how standards have fallen, about how dangerous it is to trust appearances, about how people like him represent the last line of defense against chaos. I hate that it came to this, he tells Patricia Morrison, loud enough for other passengers to hear. But in today's world, we can't be too careful. When something doesn't feel right, when the story doesn't add up, we have to trust our instincts and protect our fellow Americans. Patricia nods admiringly, clearly impressed by Robert's decisive action. You may have saved lives today, Mr. Sterling. Your experience and judgment made all the difference. But as Zara is led off the aircraft, her phone manages one final action before being confiscated. A single text message sent to a contact labeled Mom, containing just 2 words, help now. 1,800 miles away, Dr. Diana Washington is in a board meeting when her phone buzzes. The message from her daughter, who should be safely airborne by now, stops her mid-sentence. Without explanation to her startled colleagues, she grabs her phone and begins making calls that will shake the airline industry to its foundation. Robert Sterling, still basking in the admiration of fellow passengers, has no idea that he's just triggered a response that will expose every lie he's told, every assumption he's made, every abuse of power he's committed. The entitled businessman who thought he could manipulate his way into a better seat is about to discover what real power looks like when it's wielded by someone with the resources to demand answers and the determination to ensure justice is served. The aircraft remains grounded as federal investigators process what they believe to be a serious security threat. But soon, very soon, they'll learn that the real threat to everyone's safety and dignity has been sitting in seat 1A all along, spinning lies with the confidence of someone who's never faced consequences for his actions. That's about to change in ways Robert Sterling cannot begin to imagine. The aircraft's forward door opens with a pneumatic hiss that cuts through the tense atmosphere like a blade. The passengers expecting a routine delay are instead witnessing the arrival of what can only be described as a small army of very important, very angry people. Dr. Diana Washington strides onto the plane with the controlled fury of someone who has built aerospace empires and demolished corporate boardrooms. Behind her follows an entourage that makes Robert Sterling's blood run cold. FBI Director William Chen, NASA Administrator Dr. Patricia Williams, Congresswoman Angela Davis from the Congressional Black Caucus, and two federal prosecutors whose expressions suggest someone is about to face charges that will redefine their understanding of consequences. "Where is my daughter?" Dr. Washington's voice carries the authority of someone accustomed to moving mountains and governments with equal ease. "And who decided to treat a national security asset like a common criminal?" The revelation hits the cabin like a sonic boom. Robert Sterling, still occupying Zara's seat with diminishing confidence, suddenly understands that the young woman he's been tormenting isn't just some college graduate with inflated credentials. The pieces begin falling into place with terrifying clarity. "Ma'am," Air Marshal Torres begins, but Dr. Washington cuts her off with a gesture that suggests she's accustomed to commanding far more firepower than one federal agent. "Director Chen, would you please explain to these people who they've just arrested?" FBI Director Chen steps forward, his expression grim. "Dr. Zara Washington holds the highest-level security clearance in the federal government. Her fuel efficiency innovations are classified at the presidential level. She's currently working on propulsion systems that will determine America's aerospace superiority for the next 50 years. Arresting her based on anonymous tips and passenger complaints represents a massive security breach and potential threat to national interests." Robert Sterling feels the world shifting beneath him like tectonic plates. The confident businessman who thought he was teaching some entitled millennial a lesson suddenly realizes he's been attacking someone whose work is quite literally rocket science, and whose family wields influence he never imagined possible. NASA Administrator Williams activates her tablet, establishing a video connection that appears on the aircraft's entertainment screens. The image that fills every monitor is unmistakable. President of the United States, calling from the Oval Office, his expression revealing barely controlled anger. "Let me be absolutely clear," the president's voice echoes through the cabin. "Dr. Zara Washington is one of America's most valuable scientific minds. Her aerospace innovations will revolutionize both civilian and military aviation. The people responsible for this harassment will face the full consequences of federal law." The presidential intervention transforms Robert's situation from airline dispute to potential treason. Every lie he's told, every false accusation he's made, every attempt to undermine Zara's credibility suddenly becomes an attack on American national security interests. Dr. Washington's phone buzzes with incoming calls from aerospace industry leaders, defense contractors, and international allies who work with her company. Within minutes, the entire global aviation industry knows that someone attempted to destroy the reputation of their most innovative young scientist. "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Washington says, her voice carrying the temperature of liquid nitrogen, "you have been sitting in a seat purchased by Washington Aerospace Technologies for our Chief Technology Officer. You have made 8 separate false accusations against a federal employee working on classified defense projects. You have wasted the time and resources of multiple law enforcement agencies. Most importantly, you have demonstrated the kind of character that makes you unsuitable for any further interaction with civilized society." Robert tries to speak, to explain, to somehow walk back the catastrophic series of assumptions that led him to this moment. But Dr. Washington isn't finished. Your boarding pass, Mr. Sterling, indicates seat 3C in economy class. Not only have you been illegally occupying first-class seating, you've been doing so while launching what amounts to a character assassination campaign against someone whose security clearance exceeds that of most Pentagon officials. FBI Director Chen steps forward with handcuffs. Robert Sterling, you're under arrest for filing false reports with federal authorities, creating terrorist false alarms, interfering with national security operations, and civil rights violations. You have the right to remain silent. And frankly, I'd recommend exercising that right immediately. As the handcuffs click into place, Robert's world collapses entirely. The entitled businessman who thought he could manipulate any situation through sheer confidence and assumed privilege suddenly faces federal charges that carry decades in prison. But Dr. Washington saves her most devastating revelation for last. Oh, and Mr. Sterling, the engines powering this aircraft were designed and manufactured by Washington Aerospace Technologies. The fuel efficiency systems you've been experiencing throughout your years of first-class travel? Those are based on preliminary research conducted by my daughter when she was 19 years old. You've been benefiting from her innovations for years, while simultaneously claiming she's not qualified to sit in first class. The irony is so complete, so perfect, that it leaves the entire cabin speechless. Robert Sterling, the man who claimed Zara didn't belong in first class, has been unknowingly dependent on her brilliance for every comfortable flight he's ever taken. As federal agents escort Robert off the aircraft, Dr. Washington turns to address the other passengers whose phones have been documenting every moment of this extraordinary reversal. Let this be absolutely clear to everyone recording this incident. When you attack young scientists, when you make assumptions based on age or race, when you abuse whatever small power you think you possess, you're not just hurting individuals. You're attacking the very innovation and excellence that keeps America competitive in the global economy. The message resonates far beyond this aircraft cabin. Within hours, Robert Sterling's arrest will become international news, a case study in how entitled behavior can escalate into federal crimes when it targets the wrong person. But right now, in this moment, justice is being served with the precision and force that only comes when real power confronts false assumptions and wins decisively. The federal courthouse in Atlanta becomes ground zero for what legal scholars will later call the Sterling precedent, a case that redefines the boundaries between passenger disputes and federal crimes. Robert Sterling, the businessman who thought he could intimidate his way into a better airplane seat, now faces a legal reckoning that will consume his life, his fortune, and his freedom. The charges read like a catalogue of federal overreach in reverse. 8 counts of filing false reports with federal authorities, terrorism-related false alarms, civil rights violations, interference with national security operations, identity fraud related to his false elite status claims, and conspiracy to deprive civil rights under color of law. Each charge carries potential prison time that adds up to more than 2 decades behind federal bars. But the legal consequences represent only the beginning of Robert's destruction. Within 24 hours of his arrest, the video of his racist tirade against Dr. Zara Washington has been viewed more than 500 million times across all platforms. The hashtag #JusticeForZara trends globally, with international media outlets using Robert's behavior as a symbol of American entitled racism. His face becomes synonymous with the abuse of privilege, his words quoted as textbook examples of systematic discrimination. The viral nature of his humiliation transcends typical internet fame. Foreign governments cite the incident in diplomatic discussions about American values. Universities use the footage in sociology courses about power dynamics and racial bias. Corporate training programs screen Roberts' behavior as an example of what not to do when confronting people who don't fit preconceived stereotypes. His professional destruction unfolds with methodical precision. Sterling Engineering Associates, the firm he built over 30 years, hemorrhages clients within hours of his arrest. Defense contractors cancel millions in pending contracts. International partners sever relationships that took decades to establish. The company's stock price enters free fall as investors flee anything associated with the Sterling name. But Dr. Diana Washington isn't content with letting market forces exact revenge. Her legal team files a $50 million civil suit for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with her daughter's professional reputation. The lawsuit details how Roberts' false accusations could have damaged Zara's security clearance, jeopardized classified research projects, and undermined years of scientific achievement. The discovery process reveals the depth of Roberts' pattern of abuse. Airlines produce records showing dozens of complaints about his entitled behavior, his demands for special treatment, his harassment of passengers who didn't meet his standards of who deserved premium seating. Flight attendants testify about years of watching Robert bully younger passengers, minorities, and anyone he perceived as beneath his station. Most damaging of all, investigators uncover that Roberts' elite status with the airline was largely fabricated. His claimed hundreds of thousands in annual spending was actually inflated through corporate accounts that he falsely represented as personal travel. His decades of loyalty included multiple incidents where he'd been banned from other airlines for similar behavior, only to charm his way back into good standing through connections and manipulation. The federal prosecution presents Roberts' case as emblematic of how unchecked privilege can escalate into criminal behavior. They argue that his systematic harassment of Dr. Washington wasn't just personal prejudice, but an attack on American innovation and national security. When someone uses false reports to law enforcement to persecute a scientist working on classified defense projects, they've crossed the line from social misconduct to potential treason. Patricia Morrison, the flight attendant who enabled Roberts' behavior, faces her own reckoning. The airline terminates her employment after internal investigations reveal a pattern of preferential treatment for white passengers and systematic dismissal of minority travelers' complaints. She becomes unemployable in the aviation industry, her resume forever linked to the Sterling incident through background checks and media coverage. The ripple effects extend throughout the airline industry. Federal regulations now require mandatory bias training for all customer-facing employees. The Washington Protocols become standard procedure for handling passenger disputes, emphasizing documentation, equal treatment, and independent verification rather than assumptions based on appearance or demographic characteristics. Roberts' personal life disintegrates with equal thoroughness. His wife of 30 years files for divorce, citing the international humiliation and her inability to appear in public without being recognized as the spouse of that racist airline passenger. His adult children release a public statement disavowing his behavior and expressing support for Dr. Washington's family. Country club memberships are revoked. Social circles that once welcomed his presence now treat him as radioactive. The financial devastation proves equally comprehensive. Legal fees consume his savings as federal public defenders handle only the criminal case, leaving him to hire private attorneys for the multiple civil suits. His business assets are frozen pending resolution of the Washington family lawsuit. Property values plummet as his notoriety makes him toxic to potential buyers. But perhaps the most devastating consequence is the revelation of how wrong his assumptions were. Media investigations into Dr. Zara Washington's background reveal achievements that make Roberts' own professional accomplishments look pedestrian by comparison. At 23, she holds patents that generate millions in licensing revenue. Her doctoral thesis revolutionized aerospace engineering. Her classified work on hypersonic propulsion systems places her among the most important scientific minds of her generation. The young woman Robert dismissed as an affirmative action hire turns out to be a genius whose innovations power the very aircraft he's spent years flying, whose research protects American military superiority, whose mind operates on levels that transcend the petty considerations of airplane seating charts. As Robert Sterling sits in federal prison awaiting trial, wearing an orange jumpsuit that represents the complete collapse of his carefully constructed persona, he has months to contemplate how spectacularly his judgment failed him. The entitled businessman who thought he could spot fraud and scams from across an airplane cabin proved incapable of recognizing genuine excellence when it stood directly in front of him. His fall from privileged passenger to federal prisoner serves as a warning to anyone who mistakes their temporary advantages for permanent superiority, who confuses their comfort with their worth, who assumes that power gives them license to diminish others. The Sterling case becomes required reading in law schools, business schools, and ethics courses across the nation. Not as an example of how the system fails, but as proof that sometimes, when real power confronts false assumptions, justice can be swift, complete, and absolutely devastating. The NASA Ames Research Center auditorium falls silent as Dr. Zara Washington steps to the podium, her NASA Young Innovator Award catching the stage lights like captured starlight. 3 days have passed since her confrontation with Robert Sterling, and the world has watched her transformation from unknown graduate student to international symbol of excellence, triumphing over prejudice. But tonight, in front of America's most brilliant aerospace minds, she chooses to speak not about her revolutionary propulsion systems or her breakthrough fuel efficiency algorithms. Instead, she reflects on the lesson that almost cost her everything she'd worked to achieve. 3 days ago, I learned that brilliance means nothing if it's not recognized. She begins, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who has stared down systematic injustice and emerged stronger. I learned that achievement is meaningless if it's dismissed by those who can't imagine excellence coming from unexpected places. The audience, filled with NASA engineers, aerospace executives, and government officials, listens with rapt attention. Many have seen the viral videos, watched Robert Sterling's arrest, followed the media coverage that transformed a simple airline incident into a national conversation about privilege and prejudice. My research focuses on making aircraft engines 30% more efficient, reducing carbon emissions while increasing performance. Zara continues, but the most important discovery I've made has nothing to do with aerospace engineering. It's that the greatest threat to American innovation isn't foreign competition or technological challenges. It's our willingness to let prejudice blind us to the talent that exists in every community, at every age, in every demographic that doesn't fit traditional expectations. She pauses, letting the weight of that observation settle over the room. In the audience, Dr. Diana Washington watches her daughter with pride that transcends maternal love. This is the pride of watching someone find their voice in the midst of adversity, of seeing character forged in the crucible of injustice. Robert Sterling made 8 false accusations against me in the span of 2 hours. Zara says, he called me a fraud, a terrorist, a criminal, a spy, and various combinations thereof. But the most damaging assumption he made was that someone who looks like me, at my age, couldn't possibly belong in the spaces where important work gets done. The scientific community has rallied around Zara in unprecedented ways. MIT has established the Zara Washington Fellowship for Young Innovators from underrepresented communities. Boeing has fast-tracked implementation of her fuel efficiency systems. The Air Force has classified her hypersonic research at levels typically reserved for nuclear secrets.